welcome to the You're a Tourist podcast, where we get very serious and share a laugh or two about all the good, the bad, and the ugly parts of tourism that you may or may not have ever even thought about. Hopefully by the end of the episode, we'll be able to give you a few tips to make you a better tourist. I'm your host, Dr. Katie Dudley, and today we're going to be diving into a very interesting topic, an interesting topic that I don't really have much personal experience with, and that is this idea of through hiking. So when we think of like the Cheryl Strait and the Wild and the Appalachian Trail, so we're going to be diving in to through hiking. And joining me today, because I'm not an expert, joining me today is an assistant professor and applied researcher who studies human behavior in our parked and protected areas. He has done work in places like Hawaii's Volcanoes National Park, Mammoth Cave National Park, Grand Canyon National Park, Arctic National Refuge, and then, of course, the Appalachian Trail itself. Welcome to the show, Dr. Brian Peterson.
Well, thank you, Katie. I'm happy to be here, and thanks for having me. This is exciting.
Yeah. Oh, I'm excited. And we're going to jump into all of this, a little bit more about your experiences, a little bit more about our relationship formed at Clemson University. Oh, with all of the best people. But before we jump into it, Brian, Dr. Peterson, I like to play a little game with all of my guests. It's called Tourists in the News.
Ooh.
Okay. Yeah. So really what I like to do, what that does is kind of get us all in the mindset to remember again who we're talking about here. We're talking about tourists. I know in the parks we call them visitors, but at the end of the day, they're tourists, and tourists can do some wild and crazy things and make their way into the headline. So what's going to happen is I'm going to read you part of the headline, and I'm going to ask you to fill in the other part of the headline of what you think the other part of the headline is. I found some great ones that I think will really launch us into our conversation. Are you ready?
Let's do it.
Okay. So headline number 1. Here we go. Woman who fed what to a Smoky Mountains bear is in trouble, Park says. Okay, so what did she feed to a bear? This was it. Whoever wrote this headline is a little bit weird too. I feel like the words should be switched. But anyway, she fed what to a bear in the Smoky Mountains?
Yeah, it was a cheese pizza. I'm worried that the bear was dairy intolerant.
That was the real problem. The bear actually turned her in. Was just like,
yeah.
These other tourists, they're feeding me the good stuff. And this girl, this woman, now I'm just farting all over the place.
That's right. Yeah. The other tourists are not happy.
Right. I'm gonna need some pills, and I'm gonna need this woman to get out of here. Okay, no. Oh, shoot. I almost did it. No, a cheese pizza is not the answer. Crap.
Was it peanut butter?
It was peanut butter.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Is that was she doing it like to her dog at home?
I don't know. Well, so I'll read you a little bit of what the article says. So it says a well-meaning tourist, is she really well-meaning, is facing federal fines and possible jail time after getting caught feeding peanut butter to a bear in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. She was not identified by name, but park rangers said it was a 27-year-old woman. I feel like Instagram's involved, who was traveling in a vehicle with 2 other adults. Oh, so the video showed the suspect throwing peanut butter balls to the bear, according to the Asheville Citizen-Times.
Wow.
Yeah.
That will get a bear's attention.
Yeah. And have you ever looked at a bear and was just like, I can tell that thing needs some peanut butter. I need to help out. I think that bear's hungry, and I think what it needs is peanut butter from me. Like, no, what goes through your head? Hold on. We've got some quotes here. So it says, managing wild bears in a park that receives more than 12 million visitors is an extreme challenge, and we must have the public's help. Oh, it's critical that bears never be fed or approached. Okay. Oh, here we go. The last part. I was like, there was something on here that I was like, this really brings it in. It says the citation comes at a time when the U.S. Forest Service has posted alerts about aggressive bears along the Appalachian Trail in Tennessee and Nantahala National Forest in North Carolina. As a result, the Appalachian Trail is closed to camping between miles 451 through 464. Through hiking is allowed. And I don't know if this is happening like right now. I don't know if this is a like this week type of article, but yeah.
Interesting. I was hoping, so I recently saw an Instagram post that was giving advice on how to trim your dog's nails. And I was hoping the bear situation was very much similar to this. And so the Instagram post was to wrap saran wrap around your forehead and then take peanut butter and put peanut butter on the saran wrap. And so your dog licks the saran wrap and then you trim its nails while it's licking the peanut butter and distracted. And so it's like, wow, that'd be amazing if someone was trying that with bears.
I feel like I would feel differently about this article if that's what she was doing. I'm like, she's just a thrill seeker at that point.
That's right. Yeah. She's out for an adventure.
That video. Yeah. Oh man. There it says the citation carried penalties up to $5,000, folks, in a 6 months jail time. But that's like the extreme. That's like the most that you would get. But golly, people just cannot leave the animals alone. That's what we're getting. You try and manage people in these places. It's a never ending job. Okay, this one gets a little bit darker. But again, someone who has spent a lot of time in these areas, maybe you're used to the darkness. I don't know. Okay. Headline number 2, Appalachian Trail hikers well, this one's going to be clunky, so stick with me. Appalachian Trail hikers faced a man dubbed Sovereign, cops say. Okay, so what was the man carrying? So the actual headline is like, Appalachian Trail hikers faced, redheaded man with a club foot dubbed Sovereign, cops say. But what is that kind of qualifier? What was the man doing? What was he carrying? And did you know Sovereign?
Hopefully he wasn't carrying peanut butter. Was he carrying
Spoiler, they're all attached.
Yeah, he was carrying almond butter. Oh boy. I feel like maybe a pack of Sour Patch Kids, and that was enticing to some hikers. Maybe am I hitting the headline right?
Nope. You're missing the tone. You're missing the tone. We gotta get a lot darker than that.
Ooh.
Sour Patch Kids. Way too.
Give me a repeat on this.
Okay, so Appalachian Trail hikers faced. So it was a problem that they had to face this man. Cops say. So this man was holding something that upset the hikers. Cops had to get involved.
Not Sour Patch Kids. That would have made them happy. Peanut butter probably would have made them happy too. Anything food related would have made them happy. Did he have a chainsaw? No. I feel like chainsaw, all right, so I was like, chainsaw could look, aggressive, but maybe he's out doing trail maintenance too.
There you go. Yeah.
So chainsaw, what would he be holding that would kind of be alerting? Mace?
Mm-mm.
No.
Are you ready?
Yeah. This one's tough.
Okay. Machete. He was holding.
Oh.
Yeah.
All right. What's the thing that the Grim Reaper holds?
Oh, like a sickle? Is that what it's called?
Yeah. That. Oh man. Yeah. I was kind of thinking of that, and I couldn't think of the word, and I was like, I'm not gonna say it because I'm gonna mess that up.
If I'm wrong, I could be really wrong. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So no, the actual headline says Appalachian Trail hikers faced a machete wielding man dubbed sovereign.
Wow.
Yeah.
So we got two situations on the Appalachian Trail going on here.
We're going to have a third, don't you worry.
Very good.
Yeah, so this person, there's actually lots of, and this was from a couple of years ago, but apparently it was a big deal because there was lots of articles about it. So it says the suspect is charged with criminal impersonation, aggravated assault, and possession of drugs. The person ran hikers out of shelters with a shovel, and then yesterday, this is a quote from the sheriff. Yesterday, he brandished a knife and machete and stated, oh shit, here we go. And stated, it's going to be a bad day for hikers.
Wow.
Yeah, that's alarming.
That's very alarming. Yeah, that's a lot worse than Sour Patch Kids.
I mean, it would be hilarious if it was Sour Patch Kids and he still walked out saying it's going to be a bad day for hikers. They better have enough water. I'm going to dry their mouths right out.
That's right. That's right.
Okay. So this one, I don't know. If you this one, now we're taking this one back to we're staying on the Appalachian Trail. It's a long trail, Brian.
Yep.
It's a long trail, so we're going to talk about it a lot. But it's much more wholesome. So, Appalachian Trail record breaker to pay $500 fine in Maine for doing what when he finished?
He was popping champagne on Katahdin.
He did. I
actually ran into him 4 weeks ago and was chatting with him. Not about this situation, though. This is a very well-known situation.
Is it?
Yeah.
What's
Is it Scott Jurek?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that got a lot of opinions posted about that and written about that.
What was so essentially, can you give us just like a quick what happened for the listeners?
So he set out to set the fastest known time on the Appalachian Trail. So the Appalachian Trail spans from Springer Mountain, Georgia, northern Georgia, to Mount Katahdin, Maine. It's 2,100 miles approximately. And people will set out to set the fastest time on the Appalachian Trail, similarly for the Pacific Crest Trail, similarly for the Continental Divide Trail. And so he went southbound to northbound and was finishing on top of Mount Katahdin. And I think he is a well-known athlete. I think he had his crew there that was going to celebrate, but then a lot of people were following along online because he had satellite tracking. I think a lot of people met him at Mount Katahdin, and I think that there was an overabundance of people that maybe weren't permitted. I really don't know the details. There was glass up there. There was alcohol, and I don't know the exact rules of Mount Katahdin. I've only been there once myself. But there were things that people felt that he got to get away with because he's more well known than, say, the average person, I believe is what it was. Gotcha. But I would have to revisit the situation.
Yeah. And that's what kind of the tone of the article was from his point of view, is that he was being made an example of. Again, because he had so much.
That's right. Yeah.
So it's like, we don't want any of these people watching you to think that now this is what they should all go do or something like that. But not everyone does. I feel like if I finish the Appalachian Trail, even if it wasn't the fastest, I'd want to pop a bottle of champagne or something at the top.
I think just completing it is worth a celebration, right?
Yeah.
And
so
I gotta imagine
been the first one or the only one to ever do it.
There's no way. Yeah. People have got to be, sipping bourbon at the top to celebrate, whatever it is, however they want to celebrate. So I don't know what the difference was with that, but there's no way he was the first. There's just no way. I mean, the Appalachian Trail has been hiked by a lot of people, and for people that hike the whole thing or even a section, that's a huge accomplishment. And usually people that hike it for the full 2,100 miles, that's a multi-month adventure, and it can take people 4 to 5 months to do it. So of course they're going to want to celebrate when they get to the top.
Yeah. I guess he was just the one that did it in such a public way. No.
Yeah.
But Well, and so that does take us into, I won't just kind of jump into all of that. That does kind of take us into a lot of your work. And so, I asked you to come on to talk about specifically about through hiking and things like that. But your work that you do recently is kind of more so national parks, crowding, experience, things like that. But it all kind of weaves in together. So can you just give us an overview of just kind of the work that you've done, your experiences maybe on some of these trails?
Yeah, well, one of the things that tying strongly to this podcast, maybe it doesn't tie strongly, but one of the things I was thinking about before I got on the podcast is how a lot of these trails, I love the idea of backpacking, through hiking. I love doing ultra marathons. And I've seen a similar type of thing with ultra marathons is these big recreational endeavors have an economic impact and they bring tourism. And so with the Pacific Crest Trail, you hike through, and same thing with the Appalachian Trail, same thing with the Continental Divide Trail. You hike through. So let's say with the Pacific Crest Trail, you start at the border of California, Mexico. You traverse north through California, through Oregon, through Washington, and it terminates at the border of Canada. And with the Pacific Crest Trail, it's a little bit different than the Appalachian Trail. But with the Pacific Crest Trail, there's a window when people start. It's about a month and a half window. If you start earlier than that, the mountains further up are still going to be filled with snow. You won't be able to pass them, or it takes a very skilled mountaineer to pass them. If you start later than that month and a half window, things are going to be too hot in the southern desert, and you're really going to suffer from that heat and maybe lack of water. So you have a bunch of people starting at the same time. And as they go through, there is a mountain town, a town that the Pacific Crest Trail goes to on average, about 4 to 7 days. And that town knows exactly when Pacific Crest Trail hikers are coming through. There's economic impact. Pacific Crest Trail hikers are going to want to do laundry. They might want to use an internet cafe. They're definitely going to want to eat a ton of food. They might want to party, laundromat, whatever it is. Those amenities really go a far way. And so there is this kind of quick month and a half of tourism in those towns as the herd, because that month and a half creates a herd of Pacific Crest Trail hikers. That herd goes northbound, and most people hike the Pacific Crest Trail northbound. And so that herd it's like this tourist herd where they're coming in and spending money.
Do you think so? I mean, I know that these towns are ready for it and wanting it, but like, what about some of that? Because I've heard some people over the years. I've met people who've done kind of these hikes, and especially the Appalachian Trail, where it's like it went from this kind of personal journey and quest to almost like a roving party that just goes down it. And then, of course, I threw out the Cheryl Strayed and stuff, and everybody's kind of made jokes about how many people flock to the Pacific Coast Trail after that. So, are there any, like, in any of the time and the work that you did on that and since then, have you seen some changes like that? Maybe some issues that have come?
Yeah. I think that there is a roaming party that does happen on the trails, and you can choose to be a part of it. You can choose to do your own thing. Like, you can still kind of hike as a lone wolf if you want to, and maybe join up with a pack every now and then if you want to. But I do know people that have set out to hike the Pacific Crest Trail, and they ended up quitting because they said they didn't enjoy the culture. They wanted more solitude. They wanted to be camping by themselves at night. And so you have this kind of this thing going on that's a tension where there is increased excitement and use on these long trails. And you're like, hey, from a health standpoint, that's fantastic. People are out doing something that's adventuresome. There's all kinds of mental health benefits, all kinds of physical health benefits. And they're becoming really popular, but that also has a displacing effect too for maybe those that want solitude and whatnot. And so I know that my backpacking perspective has evolved, and that's just mine. And so I started out wanting to do the Pacific Crest Trail, the Appalachian Trail, the Continental Divide Trail. I want to do all three, and they call that the Triple Crown.
Okay.
And I've actually evolved to doing off-trail backpacking routes, and I love doing them in the Sierra Nevada. And I used to do those map and compass, and they would be pretty intensive for navigating.
Mm-hmm.
Now I kind of just take it easy, and I put a digital line on my map, and I pretty much follow a digital trail, but there's no physical trail. And then I have a lot of
Oh,
solitude. I'll get to a lake. It might just be me and my wife backpacking. We have that lake to ourselves. We can camp there. We'll camp there. We'll be there by ourselves. We don't have to hear other people. We also don't have to be worried about any of the ecological impacts that do happen from when you have a lot of people. So, are the water
yeah.
sources, are people going to the bathroom, taking their bio breaks near the water sources? Is that messing up the
Uh,
water sources? Stuff like that. There are, especially along the southern part of the Pacific Crest Trail, the herd spreads out more and more as you get further and further north. But
mhm.
toilet paper gardens are known to exist, where it's like you got to go
No.
to the bathroom and you pull off the trail by 20 yards. You go to a flat area and you go to dig your cat hole, and you end up digging up someone else's cat hole.
Oh
Um,
no.
yeah, that stuff happens out there, and that's just not. On top of that, like I enjoy my solitude, and also my, I guess you can say, kind of skill level has evolved a little bit too, where I do
Mm,
want that kind of off trail adventure, despite that, yeah, I'm pretty much following a digital trail. So I think
gotcha.
it's a tough situation on these big major trails. Pacific Crest Trail, Continental
Yeah.
Divide Trail, Appalachian Trail, they've become really popular. And part of me is like, that's fantastic, but it does come with the limitations that people are displaced. And, but there's plenty of other things to do out there. And there are other, backpacking off trail is not for everyone. Like, you really put yourself out in a vulnerable situation, but there are other
Yeah.
long trails that don't get nearly as much use. So one that I've heard that is
Mm.
gorgeous and fantastic, but doesn't get as much use, goes from, the Continental Divide at Montana and Canada, and goes straight west over to the Puget Sound.
Okay.
And that
Oh,
one's
okay.
really popular. And I forget what that one's called, the Pacific Northwest Trail, I believe. I've
Mm,
heard that one is, I don't want to call it popular. I just said that, but popular in terms of like it's known to have more solitude than those big three trails.
gotcha.
And especially the Pacific Crest Trail and the Appalachian Trail, I believe those are the two most popular.
Yeah.
And I think if it seems like it's really popular with younger adults, like you get out of college and you go on your pilgrimage type of thing, which
Mm-hmm.
when I was that age, I would have loved that. I think that's really
Yeah.
cool. So they got their pluses and minuses. I think they got their personalities.
Oh, ooh, personalities. What do you think? Like if you were sitting at a bar with Pacific Crest Trail, Appalachian Trail, we know what the Pacific Northwest, they're gonna be a little too cool for everybody. They're like, oh, nobody's discovered us yet.
I think that you're probably, in terms of personality, it's more of an adventure of self exploration for younger adults.
Mm-hmm.
Um, is how I would classify it. But like, I haven't been out on those trails in a little while. I mean, this is all coming from, just hearing stories and opinions from people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, where, and I think that's great. Like, especially like if you're setting out to go hike the Pacific Crest Trail and you're doing it as a solo hiker, and you're like, okay, like, I'm going to go hike this thing 2,650 miles. It's going to take me 5 months. It's going to take me through terrain that
Mm,
I've never heard of it before this.
yeah.
That's kind of scary and intimidating. And so, especially like if you're anyone, you might want to join forces with other people that you trust, to help you
Mm,
navigate some of the challenges of the terrain. So, for example, in the Sierra Nevada, you will see a lot of snow in the Pacific Crest Trail, but more dangerous is roaring rivers that you do have to cross. And so, those
ugh,
rivers might
yeah.
be up to, say, your waist or something, or above your waist, depending on your height. And you got your 40, 50 pound pack on you, and you could easily, trip and fall while doing that. And so it's nice to do that with
Yeah.
other people, or even be able to link arms with people and go across the river together.
So, I mean, I think this kind of takes us into a lot of, so I think for one, um, I think a lot of listeners maybe, and this is just again from kind of my experience of trying to tell people like what I do, as far as what like a degree in parks and recreation and all of that would entail. Because again, I think that most people kind of think of like if you work in the parks or if you do research in the parks or something like that, then it's more of a hard science, like you're doing that type of thing. And I was trying to explain, like, no, we're the human side of that. Like, and just like we talked about from the headlines, arguably the humans are a lot harder to manage. And so we're seeing not only with the through hiking and a lot of the problems with that, but the same thing of where now it's almost like what the National Park Service wanted, they got what they wished for, and everybody absolutely loves the national parks. And now all we're seeing is people waiting in long lines to like catch the shuttle and Zion and like all, you know, and just people acting crazy and getting too close to animals. So just kind of tell us then what it is. For one, folks, there's people out there on this. They know that it's getting crowded. They know that it's affecting your experience. So tell us kind of what you do then, like what your research kind of looks at, what you hope to get out of it, all of that. Because again, it is you're very applied. So you do work with the National Park Service. You do help them implement regulations, all of that kind of stuff. So can you just kind of toss out a few?
Yeah, I have 5 ongoing projects right now. So one is with the National Park Service, and one is dealing with a type of tourism that is they actually got sued for. They were not managing it effectively, and without managing it effectively, wildlife were being heavily impacted. And so were other people, but especially wildlife. And they got sued for not managing overflights as an air tours above their national parks. And so those air tours were disrupting the natural soundscape, which a lot of wildlife rely on the natural soundscape for vocalizations to hear each other, mating calls, all sorts of things. That natural soundscape is a resource for wildlife. And overflights, especially low-level overflights, are considered the most pervasive source of noise at national parks. Now, what does that mean? So pervasive is kind of like all over the place, okay? So you have your front country where you got cars driving, and they release a geographic scope of a noise impact along the road. But you have overflights crisscrossing everywhere. And so with the National Park Service, they had us gather data of flights and analyze them for about 13 national parks, so that they then can use that information to put together park-specific air tour management plans. And that was court mandated after they got sued for not managing them specifically. And so we kind of figured out, how do you collect travel pattern data of overflights? How can you do that passively? Is that data accurate? Can it be used to inform air tour management plans? And we did that. We also put out acoustic monitoring equipment too. Thing with acoustic monitoring equipment, though, is like it's at a location. You got another one at a location. You got another one at a location. With a lot of the travel patterns, we know that if it's this type of aircraft, it's flying within this level of the ground, it's causing a noise impact. And so we analyze the corridors they're using above ground altitude. So we look at their altitude above mean sea level. So like they're like 13,000 feet. And that just kind of helps us kind of macro understand where they're at. But then we start looking at very specifically how high they are above the ground, above ground level. And that really helps us understand if they're causing noise impacts or not. And so in a lot of the air tour management plans, they have rules about flying above 2,500 feet above ground level, so that you're not causing a noise impact to the wildlife below. And the National Park Service, they're able to manage most types of overflights. They're not able to manage commercial that are up at 30,000 feet, but they possibly could help. They possibly could have a little bit of influence on those routes. Those routes are very concise. They hit waypoints in the sky. They'll hit a waypoint and they kind of turn over here. And so National Park Service has worked to get some waypoints removed from within their boundary. National Park Service can't manage military aircraft. And so military aircraft flying over Olympic National Park in the Pacific Northwest is a problem. They have growlers that fly overhead, and they're super loud.
Yeah.
So that's one project right there. And so one of the major things that we did for that project is we provided the information that helped them formulate these air tour management plans. But the data that we get, it's a type of data that's called ADSB, and it stands for Automatic Dependent Surveillance Broadcast, whatever that means. So it's relatively simple. So inside the aircraft, they're connected to the GPS system. They're getting their longitude, they're getting their latitude, they know their velocity. But what they do is using this ADSB system, they transmit out a radio wave to other aircraft that says, hey, this is where I'm at. This is my tel number. This is who I am. And that is sent out twice per second. And that radio wave is unencrypted and publicly accessible. And so we've been collecting those above national parks and analyzing that data. And that data is really, really big data. So for example, I forget the exact time period, but at Grand Canyon, we analyzed over 42 million waypoints for them. And to make that happen, we brought in a software engineer who then wrote an automated kind of an analysis toolbox to analyze all that. So cleaning the data, processing the data, and then delivering outputs so that we can kind of be really quick and efficient with putting these reports together, because the whole project is on this time crunch for stuff to get out for these air tour management plans. So that was something that we developed, and we developed it in a way that is meant to be adopted by NPS employees with minimal GIS training. So they can pretty much come in there and click away and analyze overflight. So ingest your data and then off you go type of thing.
Okay. It's kind of like, so when you say like the overhead tours and stuff, is it also of like tour companies then that see Yellowstone from the sky? And it's like
100%. And that's something too that comes with that social aspect that the National Park Service has to tread with empathy and tactfully, because some of these companies, that is their sole livelihood. And so it's something that the National Park Service is not out to eliminate overflights. They're out to manage them. So we don't need 30 helicopters buzzing 1,000 feet above ground level at the same time. Let's spread these out. Let's manage them, and let's do it in a way that your business can still thrive. Let's do it in a way that the natural soundscape remains a resource for wildlife. And the natural soundscape is something that can be experienced by visitors to national parks.
Yeah. Because like you say, I mean, there's definitely impacts on the wildlife, but I mean, also if you're out there for solitude, I live in Long Beach and around LA. I can tell you, but helicopters all the time gets real old. I wouldn't want to be hearing that in my national park either when I'm trying to get away from it.
Totally. So it's, and like, I mean, I gotta say, like, I'm not opposed myself to taking an air tour above a national park. I think it'd be a great way to see Grand Canyon or to see Yellowstone or to see Yosemite, but I am a strong believer that they should be managed. They shouldn't go unmanaged.
Yeah. And I think that's the hard thing when we do talk about kind of parks and protected areas and the management of them, because again, I do think the general public, like, it is alarming the amount of people when I tell them that, because just for sake of ease, I just say that I do parks and recreation because like by a weird fluke, I'm now the outdoor rec person in my department. And so, I say things like national parks and that's where like state parks and that's where students can go. And so I think it's just something in the general public's mindset that they don't think that thought goes into managing the people, that it is just like, these are national parks, they're open for everyone. And so just in the morning, someone opens the gate and then everybody can go do what they want to do. So then it becomes kind of an issue. And I feel like this is probably very similar for the through hiking, because then anytime it's like management becomes a bad word then, because it's just another thing that the government's telling me how I can,
Yeah.
how I can enjoy all of these public spaces. But I think it's something, and this is what happens with my students, is their knowledge and what they're so used to, because of course we're here Yosemite, and you have to get a permit, you have to do stuff to go like El Capitan and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, yeah, all of that stuff that you're used to doing that you think comes with a national park, like, yes, that's a management strategy. People put those in place for certain things. And so now, again, we've got ourselves into a good situation to where everyone loves the national parks and can't wait to get there. But it may require reevaluating some of these management strategies.
And I do think, like, yeah, they should be reevaluated. And I'm not saying every single one should be reevaluated, but at what, say, time period, and it's going to be contextualized. It's very unique to each type of management decision, but how long does that last in the future? And as you mentioned, a lot of things, and myself included, I go into a national park, there's so many things that research has gone into that I take for granted, such as recycling signs at a campground. That has been researched and backed by the theory of planned behavior, and then the behavioral intention tested to see if the behavior is actually manifested in people. Are they recycling, and are they recycling what is meant to be recycled and throwing away what is meant to be thrown away? Stuff like that has been researched. So it's really interesting. I think that with managing people, we have this situation where, we got more and more access going into national parks, got more and more people through hiking and enjoying these wonderful trails. Is the social science able to handle that access and come up with strategies and tactics that aren't overbearing, so they're more educative, more indirect, that allow for increased access, but kind of stop the ecological impacts, so the ecological impacts aren't spreading to a bigger and bigger degree, along with that access increasing? Can the social science keep up with that and allow for that access, allow for more people to get the health benefits, the mental health benefits, the physical health benefits, but be able to provide strategies for managers that are more so indirect and educative, that limit the spread of ecological impacts? And I do think that is possible, but I think that's where the science is on a constant development, a constant flux. And part of that is that most situations are very different. So one of the things that we see here in Kansas is we're in a prairie type of ecosystem. And a lot of things that happen here are going to be very different than trying to mitigate ecological impacts in different areas. Our culture here is different than other areas too. So that's got to be considered as well. So that is a challenge, but also a fun challenge.
Yeah, because it's got to be so hard, because it is also of like, we are so good as tourists, as visitors, as consumers, of telling people exactly what we should say. I mean, think about our whole lives. We curate these special profile bios. Everybody's on dating apps, and it's just like, we know how to put our best foot forward and say, like, I would never do that, or yes, I do know how to do that, and this and that. And then it's like, but then we have to couple that with how people go on vacation and lose their minds, right? So people are like, well, that kind of stuff doesn't count. I'm on vacation. And then it's just like, so yeah, I'm curious to see how we move forward to get past that, to get like, well, they're saying this, but we're seeing that. So how do we even find out how to mitigate any of that?
Yeah. And I see that too. I see that at ultra marathons. So in ultra marathons, you have a bunch of people that are doing this long trail run through the mountains, and they probably train in the mountains and train on trails, and they love it. But let's say they're doing a long race, 50 miles or 100 miles, and at some point they need to take a lengthy bio break. And are in the midst of the race, are they going to practice leave no trace ethics? Are they going to get far enough away from the trail? Are they going to be far enough away from water sources? Are they going to dig an adequate cat hole? And so I think that there's and ultra marathons are probably a good example of where maybe some L&T education could be incorporated as part of like maybe the registration process or something. So like, hey, like you got to go through like a quick like 10-minute online L&T course that talks about L&T within an ultra marathon, and you know what to do when you're racing and you feel like you got to keep racing, but you got to go to the bathroom too. What do you do? And so it educates people. And I think that education, like I think education is a major component of all this. And I think if the education is delivered effectively, hopefully, you know, that is really a great way to mitigate a lot of the ecological impacts that are spreading. I think it's always challenging to see when managers have to have a very strict direct management action, such as limiting access or saying, hey, you can't use this trail, or you can't camp in this area, stuff like that. Like, and usually when that happens, the way that I see that, if that direct management action is occurring, the way that I see that is managers have tried their hardest to try every educational strategy possible, and it just hasn't worked. And we got to do this now. It's unfortunate, but we got to do it. Nothing else has worked.
Yeah. I think that's was it on this one? No, it was actually on a episode I recorded yesterday. And that's what it was, is there was somebody quoting, because again, it was a tourist who had done something stupid, and they were saying that like, we've got to shut down some of these monuments is what that was. And it was just like, because our hope for common sense doesn't seem to be working. And it's just like, I thought that was just such a great quote. And it's like, so if a park or an area has to shut it down, that's what they should just say, of like, hey, we really had high hopes for you all to exercise some common sense.
No common sense. Yeah. We're just going to call you out.
It's like the peanut butter balls. And it's just like, we would hope that we wouldn't get to a point where we had to make a rule about not throwing peanut butter balls at bears, but you know, you put us in that position. So
I was just imagining like a bunch of leave no trace ethics about peanut butter balls.
There's like so many more stuff now. It's just like, oh God. Well, you talk about this ultra marathon. You just did an ultra marathon. You're a little crazy there. How long did you go? How long was this?
So well, first off, let's address
the first one.
Let's fondly address the craziness, since that was the first thing you said. And it's a question I get all the time, like, you know, why do you do ultra marathons? That seems so ridiculous. And it honestly took me a while to be able to answer this question and to really see what the mechanism was. And going into an ultra marathon, you sign up for it, and you maybe have like a little bit of like I signed up for this thing. But then like, as it gets closer and closer, the intimidation factor, the scared factor, the like, holy cow, I'm taking on 50 miles, I'm taking on 100 miles. You start feeling an immense challenge. I've run 8 100-mile races in my life. I can't tell you how I do them. I still don't fathom them. I get through it, but this is a challenge that is scary. It's intimidating. It's big. And when you survive and get to that finish line, there is very few things in life that bring the amount of self-pride and enrichment that overcoming that obstacle comes. And so I don't think you need an ultra marathon for that, but I am a fan of setting big, scary goals, and goals that have a percentage of failure to them, a probability of failure. So like, not just setting goals. It's like, I know I can do that. I'll get around to it. But goals are like, you know what, I might fail, and seeing the positives in that. Like, the failure process is positive. You're not going to learn as much if you don't fail. And so I personally see the craziness of it, the scariness of it, is something really, really healthy for my well-being. So that's where the craziness comes in. But so ultra marathons, I just ran one called the Hard Rock 100, and I do want to give them a shout out, because some of the things that I have mentioned here, actually, I observed there, and they do a great job at this race. I think they are almost at the forefront of a lot of thinking. And so towards the end, like about 2 weeks leading out from the race, and I was camping at this time, and I didn't have the time to do it because I was camping. I didn't have good connectivity, but they said, hey, we're going to hold a raffle the day before race for anyone that fulfills an online L&T course, because we want our runners to be practicing leave no trace. And so that's where I started getting the idea. I was like, what? They are so smart. Like, they're so smart. Like, what a fantastic idea. Like, their race goes through pristine wilderness areas that cars can't access. Like, yes, people need to be practicing leave no trace ethic. And so how can you inspire your runners to do that? And so they did it with a raffle, and I bet they'll have something even more well developed next year. Like, maybe it is a mandatory aspect of the registration. You got to pay this fee, but you also got to take this L&T course. And another thing too, that's a little bit of away from this conversation, but another thing that Hard Rock does, and other races do this as part of the registration, is you have to volunteer at another ultra marathon event for usually it's like 8 hours. So I volunteered as part of getting into Hard Rock. I volunteered at a race event for 8 hours in April. And so I'm curious though, I think Hard Rock really hit something that's healthy here. And that is bringing L&T ethic into their process, their race process, the registration process. And I'm curious to see what they learned this year. I think this year may have been a pilot year for that. I'm not positive. I think it was the first year they did that though. And I bet they'll continue just to develop a wonderful idea.
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like they need to like hire a consultant that also does ultra marathons and could just set up a whole thing for them. Just saying, Hard Rock, you got him right there. But the other part, when you said that it makes you, and I feel like this kind of goes into our parks and long hikes and everything else. Do you think that the volunteer part of it was so that you could get rid of any, what am I trying to say? Rose-colored glasses of thinking, of like, I'm not an ultra marathoner, I'm not even a runner, but it's like, I do want to set this challenge for myself, so I'm going to run a 100-mile race. Having never seen it, having never seen the toll it takes on anyone, and just thinking, I'm just going to, I'm going to put on my tutu like a 5K, and I'm just going to trot my way 100 miles. You think that's kind of part of it?
I think there's a lot of people that do that. Like it's not unheard of. It's not unheard of. There's a lot of examples out there. Like I challenge you to do it. Not that we need to, but you would be surprised if you look at the population of people that are doing ultra runners versus the population of people doing a marathon. Marathoners, there's a lot more interest in pace because you're running on a flat asphalt. There's some hills and whatnot, but for the most part, you can be like, hey, I'm going to maintain an 8-minute pace. With an ultra marathon, you got the trails. They're up and down and they're rocky, and no one's talking about pace at all. And there's maybe the front 5 people that are racing it, and the rest of the people are surviving it. And that survival aspect is challenging, but it also relieves a lot of the social pressure too. Like, I think that one of the things that I see at a lot of ultra marathons is the last hour of people finishing. So they'll say, hey, our volunteers can only be on the course for 36 hours and we got to shut the race down. That hour from 35 to 36 gets a lot of fans out there, because those runners, in my opinion, actually have had it the most hardcore. You might have people that, like myself, who ran at college, I might be a little bit faster than 35, 36 hours. But the people that are out there for 35, 36 hours, they've been on their feet that entire time. They've been in the elements that entire time. Like, that's really, really hardcore. And there's a lot of people that are able to work ultra marathons where they intentionally will hike any uphill, even if it's just like a gentle uphill. They'll hike any flats, and then downhills they jog. And so they focus a lot on just with power hiking and hiking with urgency to get to the finish line, but they usually will incorporate about 50% of the race being walking.
Oh, okay. Well,
and myself included, I walk a lot in ultra marathons. I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's your time? Just throw it out. How long did it take you to do 100 miles?
So Hard Rock, which I just finished up 2 weeks ago, was just a little bit under 30 hours. and they
Oh
have a 48
man.
hour cutoff. And they're cut off that window of 47 to 48 is called the golden hour. And it's it's from 5 a.m. to 6 a.m. because their race starts at 6 a.m. 24 hours is the next 6 a.m. and then the next 6 a.m. is 48 hours. I wasn't able to will myself out of bed to get up for it, but watching it on Instagram, and they do a live stream. So there's all this media behind it now, which it wasn't like this when I first got ultra marathons, but they have live streaming. They bring out a bunch of satellite connections. What's the satellite connection that you can get to for Wi-Fi? A Starlink. So they'll have a network of Starlinks to be able to provide live race video feed. So they have a live stream, and so you can watch all that stuff. But yeah, I think that the barrier to access to ultra marathons is actually quite low. And like the number of miles is extremely intimidating, and it's extremely intimidating even if you've done them. But if you're like, hey, like, I'm going to go out and try it, and if I don't make it to the finish line, what do I have to lose? Whoopity do, and during the race, like, I don't think about getting to mile 100. I just think about there's aid stations every 5 to 10 miles. Okay, I'm going to get to the first aid station. I'm going to eat some potatoes there. I'm going to get to the second aid station. I'm going to see my family there. I'm going to kick with them for 10 minutes. And I'm going to get, and I just think about aid station, bite-sized chunks, essentially.
Gotcha. All right. Well, there you go, folks. Get out there and do an ultra marathon. You won't be seeing me anytime soon, but maybe sometime. Okay. So let's see a little bit. I don't know. I ask, it doesn't matter what the topic, this question comes up. I mean, this question even came up whenever I talked about jam bands. Social media. What do you think social media has done for kind of parks, protected areas, people getting outside, people maybe not thinking through things too much? What do you think? What's your thoughts on social media?
Yeah, it's a great loaded question, and one that could be broken down for a long time.
That could be a whole nother episode.
Yeah, you got a lot of positive effects and some negative things that have come out. Overall, my viewing of social media is that it has influenced more and more people to go out to parks and protected areas. And just that alone, I think, is very, very positive. That's more people getting mental health benefits. It's more people getting physical health benefits. And I love seeing that just overall societal health increase. Now, there are people that are doing things that are inappropriate because they want to get a certain reel videoed and post on Instagram to get more likes. And those actions do happen kind of naturally due to human nature. And I think, again, going back to some indirect management strategies, that stuff can be overcome with some good, effective education. And those education strategies can be very tough to identify, like which cognitive leverage points do you rely on? And I think the social science research can figure that out. But you also, with social media, there was a debate, and I think it's kind of calmed down a little bit, but there was a debate, like, do you post where you went? So if I went to this mountain peak, do I say, hey, I went to a mountain peak today, or I went to the top of Brian Peterson Mountain, or whatever it's called? And for a little while, the debate was like, hey, don't let the location out of where you've been. And then the debate kind of swung towards like, hey, like you're being a gatekeeper. Like, what about people that like live nearby there and just want to get out and go enjoy that good view, want to enjoy the solitude on top of the mountain? Like, why not provide that knowledge for them so they have those health benefits? And so it's kind of more so swung to the side of like, hey, like, like provide that information for people. But, like let them know where they can find education about acting proper behaviors that are minimizing ecological impacts, proper behaviors that aren't compromising other people's experiences. Like, you don't need to go hiking down the trail with a stereo backpack blasting music, stuff like that. Being considerate of others is very important. But I do think that overall, like, yes, it's a loaded question. There's a lot of negative behaviors that have been documented in social media, ones that are just like mind boggling. I mean, I saw a guy jumping out of a boat onto the back of an orca. And
No.
yeah,
Oh my
and like, how dumb is that? Like, I don't want to be near an
Oh
orca in the
my
water.
gosh.
Like,
No.
like killer whale's gonna eat me. Like, like I do not want to
Yeah.
be near. And this guy jumped on it, and like, luckily it didn't react, but he
Oh
jumped
my
on. There's
God.
plenty of videos of people trying to get on the back of moose or elk and ride them, or bison. And I'd like to think like I try to trend on the side of positivity with human society, that these are outliers, and they are the ones that do need some extra education, but for the most part people are out there to get the benefits, respect it, and respect others while they're out there. And so social media without a doubt has increased the level of access and the level of numbers of people going to parks and protected areas, and I do think in general that is a really, really good thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Jesus Christ. Yeah. Well, and I think, like you say, because it is fun, and we all like to, I mean, follow tour-ons of Yellowstone and all that kind of stuff. And because with all videos on social media, we love to watch the ones where people maybe not necessarily get hurt, but at least get in places where they seem like they're going to get hurt. We like people to fall. We like people to, but I think that's the other thing of what we are seeing, like you say, is what we often see is the other people kind of coming in and policing. So the other visitors who are like, don't get so close to the animal, don't do that kind of stuff. So we've still got that out there, and hopefully that kind of sticks around, to where we have, again, like we're all like, there's some people who have much more hands-on, but we're all kind of stewards of those areas. So if you see something, say something, TSA style there. Yeah. So I know, I hope, I'm trying to stay positive with you on that, with it, that we only see kind of the negative images of it. But so here, and I think that maybe, and again, with a lot of tourism and when we see kind of bad behaviors of tourists, it's almost like it's not kind of forward thinking, right? It's thinking like, maybe I'll get caught. Maybe what will happen is this, orca eats me, maybe anything like that, but not necessarily thinking about how their actions might impact other people, how it might impact people's ability to go and continue to visit some of these places. Do you just kind of, either in your own personal experience or like through your research, have you heard of places that have just had to kind of shut down for a season or two, or God forbid forever, or at least long term, because it was just like kind of overused, misused, anything like that?
I don't have any specifics off the top of my head, but there's definitely places that will temporarily shut down for restoration or something like that. But I did want to take a step back in the conversation of why this is all so important to understand.
Yeah.
And so we're looking at places that get, just run silly. It's ruining other people's experiences. Why is other people's experiences so important? And that seems like a very simple question. But the research does show that when people have quality experiences in parks and protected areas, there is a definite increase in the chances of them becoming a steward of the area. And being a steward of the area could mean acting with leave no trace ethic. It could mean just donating $5. And so in terms of conserving an area, we want people to have quality experiences, because the research shows that a quality experience is going to help with the conservation of the area. Now, there might be a timeout period with some of these places, and I don't have, a specific place off the top of my head where they're just like, hey, like, let's chill out here. And I know that there's some places. So I'm working on a displacement study that's throughout Southern California. It's in the Cleveland National Forest, San Bernardino National Forest, Angeles National Forest, and Los Padres National Forest.
All right.
Yeah, I have two research assistants going across those 4 forests for 2 months. And they've been out in California this entire time. And they're due to conclude on August 7th. They get back to Kansas, and they've been collecting a lot of
Wow.
data on displacement and whatnot. And one of the places that was really brought to our attention was places with water features, especially waterfalls and rivers that people can get into that live inland, a little bit further from the beach. Those places, there's not a ton of rivers and streams and waterfalls for people to get into, but there are some very prominent ones, and those ones have become very crowded, and people end up a party atmosphere can get going there, and that displaces people. And then it's like, well, I don't really have a lot of natural resource options that have water because it's Southern California to go to. And so that's something that is challenging for the U.S. foresters, because those people that are displaced might be the ones that are actually perfect stewards of the area. And so they're trying to kind of figure that out right now, figure out how to provide education about some alternative places that people don't know that well about, how to also manage those areas. Managing those areas, there's a lot that goes into that. Sometimes that takes multiple years of study to manage those areas. And so we're kind of getting the baseline stuff going right now, figuring out what's going on. And so that study is actually looking at displacement due to drought, but also displacement in a different sense due to wildfire. So the drought situation's kind of different in terms of some things happen at these water features and whatnot. But with wildfire, which was something that, especially during kind of the years around COVID, really increased big time. And they actually, there was a period, I think, for all 4 of those forests, maybe in 2022, I'd have to double check, where they preemptively shut down all the forests around Labor Day for a week or 2 because the conditions were so dry and so ripe for wildfires to break out. So you got these huge national forests next to these super populated urban areas. What do you do if you're the United States Forest Service? You're going to piss a lot of people off by shutting those down. So if you shut those down, you better have some other strategies to help these people get outdoors. And yes, some people will go to the beach, but not everyone's going to want to go to the beach. And so this study is kind of tying back to that scenario of like, hey, we need to develop proper education. So we're going to help them develop a menu of educational outreach possibilities for different scenarios that they can more effectively talk to the public with.
Because you're right. Shutting down those areas, especially right by Labor Day, I'm sure whoever had to make that decision maybe had a drink afterward.
Oh, I know, right? Yeah. Well, and you know what's funny is I was like, I don't know of any specific places, but let me tell you about this study where they did shut down. I just realized that.
Except for this place right next to you. So and I think that's a great point, especially about like, yes, it's not even just it. If you can't get yourself, if you're a visitor and going to these national parks, and if you can't get yourself to care enough about another person's experience to maybe not be a little bit of a jerk, think about it in that way. And that is a huge way of, if you go and destroy people's experience, then that does hurt the conservation of these areas and the opportunity to keep them open for your enjoyment. So it's never just kind of an innocent little move that you pulled there. You're not getting one over if you sneak in past a gate or something, or you get too close to an animal. It could really have some negative impacts there. So you talk a lot about displacement. So this is kind of the last thing that I'll pick your brain on a little bit. So we do, in, like you say, a management strategy that's used is, yes, maybe this place is overcrowded. If we do have too many people, we can start to send people like maybe down the road where they could have a comparable experience. Maybe we could send them to this place and things like that. So that's kind of what I wonder with like the national parks, when I see again some of these pictures and videos of just long lines of people waiting to get on shuttles and stuff to get in parks. They're just long traffic lines, And it almost makes me wonder if kind of the tourist mentality of a bucket list mentality, it doesn't necessarily matter what I'm doing as long as I'm checking something off the list. So I'm almost wondering if you think that maybe that's kind of now national parks have made it onto the bucket list. And it's like, well, I hadn't hit Zion yet, so I got to hit Zion, even if it's on a Saturday in the summer, one of the most busiest days. Um, and so it's, and when I see that, what I think of is, yes, national parks are beautiful and amazing and everything else. But if you're truly in it for hiking, if you're in it for camping, or even just kind of hanging out and socializing with family, there are so many other areas that you could do that and maybe not be as crowded, maybe take some of the pressure off. So I guess there's about 7 questions in there. For 1, do we think some of it has kind of been bucket lists? For 2, what ideas or suggestions, you know, for people to try other places? Because we know that, like you say, U.S. Forest Service manages a ton of land. Bureau of Land Management has a ton of land. And it's like, but we kind of, the average person just kind of hears of the national parks. And so if I want to get outside, that's where I go. There you go. I just said a really long question again.
That's fine. I do think that there is a bucket list effect, and there's the get your stamp in your ranger passport booklet. But I do think that even within national parks, let's look at that as a confined system. You can do things to escape the crowds. Like if you go on a hike that's a little bit steep, you're getting rid of the majority of the people. They're not going on that steep hike. If you're in an area that allows for off-trail navigation, like I just turn on my navigation app and start recording my track, and I just do an out and back on that track. It's that digital trail. And like the second I'm stepping off trail, I'm just following that, and I'm following it right back to the trail. I don't see anybody. There's things that can be done within the national park if you do want to escape the tourist. But I do think you should also be realistic if you're going to go to a place that is really, really well known. So if that's something in Zion, that's
Joshua Tree, I know, is having some huge issues right now.
A lot of the climbing rocks. I was trying to remember the name of the and I've hiked it a couple times. The river though that goes through the canyon in Zion, like there you can go hike on that river. It's about like shin deep water. Like that's, you're gonna see at the where the shuttles drop you off. You're gonna see a lot of people there doing that. Now, if you do that hike, like I've done that hike where I've gotten a ride to the top and hiked it all the way down, I didn't see anyone until the last half mile. And so like, but that required, I think, a 16 or 12 mile hike in which I started at like 6 a.m. So I had to, kind of do some things to get around where other tourists would be. So I think within national parks, busy national parks, there's plenty to do, but you got to think about, what are some strategies that other people aren't interested in doing that I can personally do to, if that is your goal, to have solitude. Now, I think the other aspect too that we should be aware of too is some people do like being around other people. It promotes a feeling of safety. And so they might actually be like, yeah, I don't want to go hiking off trail. That doesn't seem safe. No, I don't want to go hike up the steep trail and be by myself because that doesn't seem safe. Right. So some people actually like being around other people. They might be, that's how they perceive safety. They like that. They might be new to doing outdoorsy stuff. And so they just want to see how other people, like kind of like assess the norms, how other people are acting out there. So there are a lot of people that, want to be around other people too. But going back to what I said, I think within national parks, there's plenty of things that you can do to get away from the crowds. Within the national park system, there is, I'd lose count of it, but I think there's over like 400 units. I think there's like 63 prominent national parks, but there's over 400 units. And so the national parks, you should look at it across that all the units and go visit some units that are maybe mid-sized. One of my favorite mid-sized ones is Theodore Roosevelt National Park. It's pretty similar to Badlands National Park, but Badlands National Park is more well-known. I love Theodore Roosevelt National Park, and that's a mid-sized one. I do think if you're in areas like California, it's got a lot of public land. Colorado's got a lot of public land. Nevada's got a ton of public land. Utah's got a ton of public land. there are options outside of national parks for sure. Now, here in Kansas, I actually really love our state park system. And then we have
Yeah.
4 very small national park units. And a lot of people prefer going to the state parks. You got kayaking opportunities, you got mountain biking opportunities, you got camping opportunities, you got boating opportunities. A lot of people prefer to go to those over the national parks in Kansas. So I think,
Yeah.
there's all sorts of public lands out there that are worth exploring as well too, and might actually meet people's needs better than a national park in some cases.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's great. Yeah, get out there, look at. Don't just feel like you got to hit the main ones that we all know about, because especially during the summer, that's where you're going to find the crowds.
You will. You will.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay, so the last part of the show, my guest gets to say anything, any tips to tourists. Now, tips, I should preface this. So when I say tips, it's not like how to find something for the cheap, how to whatever. Tips are how you, as a tourist, can be just a better tourist to be around. So whether that's how you treat the employees, whether it's how you act around other tourists. And so what I also say too is it doesn't even have to pertain to the topic of the day. Just anything you wish you could just scream at an airport to tourists.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. I love that. I would say look at your experience from the start to the finish when you leave your house and get back home. So for example, I live in a small rural town, it's 5,000 people, and we have a small 165-acre park. And it's got about 2.5 miles of trails. And we love when people come to our park. We got a little mountain on it, and we love when people come and hike to the mountain. But what we love too is when people come into our town and go have a burger afterwards, go have some food and beverage afterwards. And so as a tourist, I think that look at your experiences going to the park or protected area, but also look at how you're going to help the local regional economies out too. And there's a lot of gateway communities to national parks in which you might get a hotel, you might go out to restaurants. You're helping those people's livelihoods. Where there's a small town like the one I live in, like it's really helping our restaurant owner. So think about all the different ways of being a tourist from the time you leave the house to you get back, when you're spending money on this or that to make it work so you can go hiking at Mount Mitchell for 2.5 miles.
Yeah, that's a great one. Because again, it's like inside the national parks. I mean, that's essentially Xanterra or Airmark or whoever the concessionaire happens to be. So if you're going and eating in those places, you're not necessarily giving the money back to a local community. And I know that there are a lot of people, a lot of our colleagues that do a lot of work looking at that, of the gateway communities that you talk about, the communities that are right next to the parks. And people just assume that they're doing well because they're positioned next to this thing that's bringing in tourism. But if people just drive through it, then they're not actually getting the benefits. So yeah, had a little time on your trip. Talk to the local folks, hang out. Yeah.
Have you ever heard of Leadville, Colorado?
I have heard of it. Yeah, I don't think I've ever been, but I've heard of it.
So Leadville is up at 10,000 feet, but in its old mining town, they were mining for lead probably. And their local economy was really diminishing to the point of like, is this just going to become a ghost town? What's going to become of our town? And they started hosting tourist events, mountain bike races, ultra marathons, trail races, and it totally revitalized the economy there. People then wanted to buy houses there. They wanted to live where they do their favorite event. And not that Leadville's like a huge town by any means, but it's brought a lot more people buying houses. You get people coming in, they're getting hotels for the weekend, they're spending money at the restaurants. And so it's amazing as a tourist, the things that you can do to help other people.
Right. Yeah. All right. Anything else?
That's it for me.
That's it. Okay. So let's see. Anything. So I don't know that I've actually said it. So Brian is an assistant professor at Kansas State University. Any young folks out here, if all of his research projects sounded interesting to you, look him up. Shoot him an email. I want to be part, because what's your lab called?
the Applied Park Science Lab. And my email, if anyone wants to email me, is brianpeterson@ksu.edu.
Right. Yeah, you can go live in state forest, national forest for 2 or 3 months and just talk to people while you're
Yeah,
collecting
we got some cool
data.
projects going. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
And it's
I wish I
actually
could promise the same, but I can't.
it's actually 2 undergrads too. Like they
Oh,
were
wow.
yeah, so they're out there doing their thing. They're fantastic undergrads, getting involved with research, and it's been a really, really great summer opportunity for them. I think both of them had never been to California. So they are dropping right into
Oh, nice.
California. They're going to 4 national forests, and then they work a regular work week. So they're doing their 40 hours and they get 2 days off.
Hmm.
And they've gotten to go out to Malibu, and they've gotten to go out to Venice
Wow.
Beach and go be tourists. Yeah, so that's been fun
Look
for
at
them.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So our
Yeah,
research is bringing some tourism to California.
exactly. Thank you. All right. Well, thank you for opening our eyes, telling us a little bit more about, especially kind of these longer things like through hiking, the ultra marathons. But again, just kind of how our protected areas are managed. For the listeners, for more things tourism, be sure to subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, or right here on YouTube. And remember, you can call yourself whatever you want, but at the end of the day, you're a tourist. And it's okay. The first step to getting better is admitting it. All right, that's it. Let me stop the recording.